Welcome to One Quick Story from the Kyle Olson Show. I don't think the stakes can be any higher in the Georgia Senate races in January. If the Democrats win both of them, the Senate will be a 50-50 tie, and the declared Vice President-elect Kamala Harris will be the tiebreaker. What happens after that? John Carney, Breitbart News finance and economics editor, wrote a piece last week titled, "Biden's Massive Tax Hikes Inevitable If Democrats Win Georgia Senate Races." He joins me now. So, John, detail some of what Joe Biden has planned if he's sworn in on January 20th.
So he has said very clearly that raising taxes will be one of his top priorities. He wants to raise taxes on large businesses, taxes on small businesses, taxes on anybody who doesn't have health insurance. He's bringing back the Obamacare individual mandate, and he wants to raise payroll taxes on and income taxes on anybody who earns over $400,000. So this is going to be a massive tax hike in the midst of an economic slump. There's no school of economics that recommends doing this right now, and yet they've stuck to their guns and said that they will make it a top priority, and there won't really be an easy way to stop them if the Democrats win both of those seats down in Georgia.
So let's take a couple of different examples that you've got here. Why? And let's start with this question. Why are Democrats so naive in thinking businesses pay taxes?
It's a very good question. I think they know better. Maybe Joe Biden doesn't know better, but surely his advisors do. They know that businesses, small or large, are essentially pass-through entities, that the profits generated by businesses go to the shareholders and to the workers. And so when you raise taxes on a corporation, what you do is you say that the shareholders, people who are investing for their retirements, everybody's 401k, will get less of that money, and the workers will get less of that money. So it's bad. So it hurts the income of both the wages and dividend income. And because basically just for the very simple reason that the government's taking a bigger share of it. So there's less of it left over for the private sector.
So you say he wants to bring back the Obamacare individual mandate tax. What exactly does that mean for the healthcare consumer?
Well, so what it means is that if you are somebody, Donald Trump repealed this tax. This is a tax that's a penalty if you do not have health insurance. If you're somebody who's decided you'd rather, go through healthcare on a cash basis, or just, can't afford health insurance at a given point in time, you're assessed a penalty. So Donald Trump repealed that penalty. Joe Biden wants to bring it back. That is, it survived through the legal challenges because the courts ruled that it was a tax and not a penalty. And so bringing it back constitutes raising taxes on Americans, regardless of where their income is.
And you say he wants to increase the estate and gift taxes. Talk more about that.
Sure. One of the things that, again, was an accomplishment of the Trump era was lowering the estate and gift taxes by raising the dollar amounts that the tax would kick in. We don't have exact numbers for where Biden would end up putting this, but what he wants to do is capture a larger share of estates. This is, in some ways, people think of it the wrong way. They think that this is a way of dividing up wealth in America more equally, but the ultra wealthy get through this all the time with all sorts of tax loopholes. So it doesn't really hurt them at all. The people it's really going to bite on are people who own appreciated assets, a family farm that's been in the family for generations. When you try to pass on those appreciated assets that might be worth a lot of money, but doesn't necessarily generate a lot of income, you have to pay an enormous penalty to pass it on to the next generation. That can hurt business owners a lot.
So there's so many businesses across the country, in Michigan, in New York, California, Illinois, across the country, that are just, I mean, they're just barely hanging on because of the lockdowns and the shutdowns and the restrictions and all of that. What would these sorts of tax hikes do to those businesses who are just barely hanging on?
I think it will discourage a lot of people from keeping their businesses open. If you want to invest in your business, you want the return to be as high as possible. Raising the taxes on the businesses actually will lower the returns. Another thing that this does, and I haven't seen anybody else mention this, is that it will raise the price of utilities, so electricity, water, gas, on everybody. Because when you raise the corporate tax, that raises the taxes on the companies that provide these utilities. By law, in almost everywhere in the U.S., they're allowed to pass on the cost of taxation onto the consumers of utilities. So even though that's not a direct tax on Americans, it means that the cost of living will go up. People will be paying more for their water, for their electricity, for their natural gas. And so it really is a tax on American households and on American businesses, because businesses use energy as well. And so I think combining this, higher tax rate plus higher utility bills may have a pretty detrimental effect to people's willingness to even stay in business. If you're already marginal, this could push you over the edge.
Do you have any estimates on what people could see in terms of utility hikes?
It's really hard to tell exactly, and it depends on how these utilities end up dealing with the tax burden. One of the things that a lot of businesses, not the utilities so much, but a lot of businesses have a lot of losses. So they may not be hit immediately with a cash crunch from a tax hike, because they're going to be able to use some of the losses generated in this horrific year to offset some of the taxes, but it will discourage investment. In other words, if you had a project that was going to give you a 4% return after taxes, and then the taxes go up and eat away that return, you don't do it anymore. So marginal expansion, which is how the economy grows, the risky ventures and marginal expansion will not occur when you push the tax rate further and further up.
So if the Democrats win the 2 Senate seats on January 5th, how difficult will it be for them to enact all of these tax increases that you're talking about?
It will almost, as I said, inevitably happen. They have said that they plan to do this. There probably is not one Democratic vote against these tax hikes. I would hope, and maybe I'm being a little too optimistic, that they will not do this right away. If they try to raise taxes while the economy is shutting down again, which it very likely will be in January, I think that is a recipe for economic catastrophe. I hope wiser, more prudent minds will prevail upon the administration to at least hold back for a little while. But I worry because there really is no reason to raise taxes right now. The government is not starved of revenue. It has as much money as it needs to do all of the things it wants to. We just passed a huge $2.3 trillion spending bill, $900 billion of stimulus in there. We don't need to raise taxes. We can borrow very cheaply. There's no reason to do this except really the pig-headedness of the incoming Biden administration saying that they want to raise the taxes.
John Carney, Breitbart News finance and economics editor. Thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Go to Breitbart.com to find Biden's massive tax hikes inevitable if Democrats win Georgia Senate races. Thank you so much for joining me today for One Quick Story. For more of my work, go to Breitbart.com or find me on Parler, Kyle Olson 4. Kyle Olson 4. KYLEOLSON and the number 4. For this episode and others, visit thekyleolsonshow.com. thekyleolsonshow.com. This is One Quick Story from The Kyle Olson Show.